Hi everyone, myself Dr. M. Lakshmi Prasad, working as an associate professor in the Department of Data Science in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. So in this video, I'm going to discuss about what are the different methods that are available for collecting the data. So there are so many types of methods that are available for collecting the data. So normally the data is going to be classified into different types like primary data and secondary data. So primary data means is the data where you can able to collect from the initial persons, right? And then secondary data means where you can able to collect the data from other sources. So first we have to understand what are the objectives for identifying the data collection. So for that, first one is that what is the need of data collection, and then what are the various sources of data, and then primary data. So again, what are the methods that are available for collecting the primary data, and then what are the merits and then demerits we are going to see. And secondary data. So secondary data means what is the availability of secondary data, what are the characteristics that are going to be identified, and then merits and demerits of the secondary data. And finally, you can able to see that there are differences between the primary and then secondary data. Okay, so these are the objectives. We are going to see this in this video about the methods for data collection. So need of data collection. So data collection is the term that is going to be used to describe the process of preparing and collecting the data. So data collection means is the term that is going to be used so to describe the process of preparing and then collecting the data. So data are the basic inputs to any decision making process in any fields like education, business and industries. So data, normally the data is going to be of basic source for any kind of making the decision or making the processing in the various fields like education, business and industries. So what are the various sources of the data we're going to see now? So first thing is the primary data, and then second one is the secondary data. So the data what we initially collected, that should be the primary one. So like person to person interview collecting the data, and then secondary data means where you can able to get the data some other sources like internet, books and all like this. So primary data. So primary data is the data that is going to be collected for the first time and thus happen to original in character. So primary data means that is the original data. So where can able to collect it the first time and maybe happen to original in character. So and this is the real time data actually, which is going to be collected by researcher himself. Otherwise, this is the data which is going to be collected with by various investigations or researchers like. So that kind of data will becomes treated as a primary data. So this process of collecting and making use of data, what we call as primary one, and the primary data has not been published, and that should be more reliable, authentic, and objective. So the primary data is the data till now has not been published, and it should be more reliable, authentic, and objective. So what are the different methods that are available for collecting the primary data? So for that, what we are going to see here is uh, observation method is the one with the first thing, and the second one is the interview method, and third one is the through questions I can able to do, and through schedules, and some other which may also include like warranty cards, consumer panels, and distributor audits, and then battery audits, and then depth interviews, content analysis like this. So these are the some of the ways we can able to collect the primary data. So methods like observation method is the one. So we're able to extract the data by observing the experiments, what we call, and then interview methods. So for conducting the interviews, we can able to extract the data from person to person. And third one through questionnaires also can able to do, and those some schedules are able to extracting the data, and some other methods like warranty cards, and then consumer panels and distributor audits, planetary audits, and depth interviews and content analysis like this. So let's see one by one here. So observation method. So observation is the most commonly used method that is going to be specially used in studies to relating to behavioral sciences, and this information can be obtained under this method relates to what is currently happening, that is not compiled by either the past behavior or the future intentions or attitude. Okay, so the information what we're obtaining under this method so relates to what is currently happening, which is not complicated by either the past behavior or through future intentions or attitudes. So while using this method, so many of the researchers should keep in mind that so what should be observed, and then how observation should be recorded, or how the accuracy of the observation can be ensured, right? So through this observation, so these are we can able to mainly focus on the studies of behavioral science, and then we can able to identify different types of observations like structured observation and unstructured observation. So structured observation means where can able to uh, incorporate some of the standardized conditions of the observation and selecting of relevant data of observation. Okay, so that and all will comes under as a unstructured structured observation, and but when an observation is going to take place without any characteristics in advance, though then should be treated as an unstructured observation, right? So the observation methods only classified into two types. The first one is the structured one, and the second one is that unstructured one. So when structured data means where you can able to observe the style of recording, and then observing the information, standardized conditions of observation, and selecting of relevant data of observation. So this under will be treated as a structured observation. And whenever the observation are going to take place without any of these characteristics, so that should be terminated as an unstructured observation. So what are the merits of this method, and what are the demerits of this method? So merits is that the researcher is going to be enabled to record the natural behavior of the group, and the researcher can also even verify the truth of the statements made by the information in the context of questionnaire or schedule. And the researchers can even gather the information which could not be easily obtained if he observes in a disinteresting fashion, right? So the researcher is going to be unable to record the natural behavior of the group, and researchers can even verify the truth of the statement made by the informations in the context of a questionnaire or schedule. And the researcher can also even gather the information which could be easily be obtained if he observes in a disinterested fashion also. And while coming to the demerits of this method, this should be very expensive one, and the information what they provided by this method is very limited, and sometimes some unexpected factors may also interfere with the observational task. So these are the demerits of this method, right? So whenever the comes to the merits of this, so the researcher can easily record the natural behavior of the group, and the researcher can also even verify the truth of the statement by the information what he is extracting, and the information what he gathered should not be easily obtained. That is the major advantage. So based on the observations, even in a interested fashion. So demerits or disadvantages is that so it should be very expensive method, since you're going to incorporate only very less of information, and more expenses have to be incorporated here, and the information what they provided it should also be very limited one, and sometimes some unexpected factors may also be interfere with the observational task. And second one is that interview method. So interview method is the thing where you can able to collect the data involves the presentation of oral verbal stimuli, reply in terms of oral verbal responses. So this method can be used through personal interviews and if possible through the telephone interviews also. Okay, so interview method is the thing where you can able to extract the data mm, by involving that oral verbal stimuli and then also be reply in terms of oral verbal responses also. So this method is going to be used personally through the interviews only and through also can be implemented through telephone interviews. So the personal interviews, so one thing where this it could require the person as an interviewer asking the question generally in face-to-face contact to the other person or persons. So personal interview. So this is also one type of method where the person should be act as an interviewer, asking the question and extracting the data by face-to-face to contact person or to the face-to-face to the other persons. When it comes to demerits of this one, so there more information that is uh, too in depth, greater depth can be obtained is the best advantage of this method, and there should be a greater flexibility and the observation method can as well as apply to the recording the verbal answers to the various questions, and the personal information can also be obtained under this method, right? So the advantages of this method is that the more information can be obtained, so which in-depth detail can be obtained here, and there is a flexibility under this method where this observation method as well as applied to the recording the various verbal answers to the various questions, and the personal information can also be obtained under this method. When it comes to demerits of this one, so it should be also very expensive method, and then especially it is going to be used when large and widely spread geographical sample is going to be taken, and there should be some overhead headaches is going to be occurred due to supervision and the control of interviewers, and certain types of respondents can also be makes the difficult in order to obtain approaching this method. So these are the disadvantages of this method. So the demerits is that it should be very expansive method, and when I'm going to apply large and widely spread geographical samples, and this should be remains headache of supervision, and then the control of interviewers is another disadvantage, and certain types of respondents such as important officials or executives or people in a high income groups may not easily approachable under this method. And the other part of this interview method is through telephone interviews. So this method also going to be collect information in contacting the respondents on telephone itself, but it is not widely used method, but plays an important part in industrial surveys and particularly in developed regions. So the telephone interviews is another kind of method that comes under interview method. So where the person can able to contact the respondents through telephone by collecting the information, and but this method is not that much widely used, but it plays an important role in industrial service, particularly in developed region. Merits is that it is faster than other methods, that is a quiet way of obtaining information, and it should be more flexible in comparison to the mailing method, and it is cheaper than the personal interview method. Here is the cost per response and should be relatively low. So recall is easy and no field staff is going to be required. Right, so the merits is that so it should be a fast method compared to other one where you can able to quickly extracting the data, and it should be more flexible in comparison to the mailing method, and it is also the cheaper than the personal interview method. Here the cost per response is also relatively low. Recall is also very important and very easy here, so no field staff is going to be required. Well, coming to the demerits of this method, only little time is given to the respondent for considering answers, and then interview period are also not likely to exceed 5 minutes in most of the cases. And the surveys are going to be restricted to the respondents who have telephone facilities, and the questions have to be short and to the point. So these are some of the disadvantages of this telephone interviews. And another way of collecting the data is through the questionnaires. So through this method, it should be quite popular method, but particularly in case of being inquiries, I can able to apply this method questionnaires. And this should be mostly adopted by the private individuals or research workers, private and public organizations, even by the governments. And in this method, the questionnaire is going to be sent to the person concerned with the request to answer the question and return the questionnaire. Okay, so this method of collecting information is quite popular, particularly in case of big inquiries, yeah, which is going to be adopted by private individuals, research workers, private and public organizations, and even by the government. But in this method, the questionnaire is sent to the persons concerned with the request to answer these questions, and then should be able to return to the questionnaire. So the merits claimed on behalf of this is that so this should be very closed even when the universe is large and widely spread geographically, and the respondents should have a sufficient time to give well thought out answers, and the respondents who are not easily approachable can also reach it conveniently. So these are the merits of this one. So the respondent should have a sufficient time to answer this question. So that is the one advantage. And the respondents can also be reached conveniently, which is not easily approachable. And they should be also less low cost even whenever the universe is large and widely spread geographically. When it comes to demerits of this method, so this should be used only whenever the respondents are going to be educated and cooperating. So that is the disadvantage of this method. And the control over the questionnaire may also lost once it is sent. And there is a inbuilt inflexibility, and this method is likely to be the slowest of all. So these are the disadvantages. So this means so the disadvantage, the respondent should be executed one, that is the disadvantage, and the control over the questionnaire may also be lost once it is going to be sent, and inflexibility is not that up to the mark, and this method is likely to be slowest of all the cases. So next one is another way of collecting the data is that through schedules. Uh, so this method is very much likely the collection of data through questionnaire, which with a little difference, which likes in fact that the schedules are being filled by the enumerators who are specially appointed for the purpose. And these enumerators, along with the schedules, go to the respondents and put into them questions from the pro forma, and in order to the questionnaires are listed and record the replies in space meant for the same in the pro forma. And this method is also very useful in extensive queries and queries, and may also lead to the fairly reliable results. So, however, so this should be very expensive one, and it should be useful or applied in investigations and then conducted by the government agencies or some other big organizations. So the collecting the data through schedules mainly are applied by many of the companies or governments. So much likely is that the collection of data through the questionnaire is the thing, but with a little difference which lies in the fact that schedules are being filled by enumerators, and these enumerators along the schedules and go to the respondents and put them questionnaires from the forma in order to answer the question that is listed and recorded those data what they collected. And this method should also be useful in extensive inquiries and may also lead to the fairly reliable results in the thing. However, mainly this method should be very expensive one, and it should also be adopted many of the investigations that are conducted by the government agencies. Some other methods of data collection will be warranty cards, uh, where the information what they put in the warranty card should also be primary data, and distributors or the store audits, and then consumer panels, and some of the use of mechanical devices extracting the data and then projective techniques like this. So these are the some of the ways of collecting the data. So warranty cards is the thing where I can able to extract the data what should be the primary one, and then distributor store audits also and the thing where can able to extract this, and consumer panels and the use of mechanical devices and the projective techniques like this. So these are some of the other methods of data collection, right? And the next one is the primary data. So primary data, uh, what are the merits and demerits? So through the primary data, so high accuracy of the data is the advantage of this method, and data interpretation should also be better, and it should also be more flexible one where can also address the research issues and up to date. So these are the advantages of this primary data. So the data, high accuracy of the data is going to be getting here, and the data interpretation should also be better one, and it should be also be more flexible, and it should be also address specific research issues and up to date. And demerits is that it should be quite expensive and then time consuming, so not available immediately, and rejected by some of this respondents, not taken seriously, and require a lot of skills in which with lab is going to be required, right? So the demerits is that so it should be very quite expensive technique to extract the primary data, and should also be time consuming, and not available immediately is the thing, and rejected by some of the respondents, not taken it seriously, and required a lot of skills with the library. So while coming to the secondary data, the secondary data means where the data is already available, and these are going to be referred to the data which is already being collected and analyzed by someone else. Some secondary data mainly either published or not unpublished data. So mainly, usually the published data is going to be available on various publications of central, state, and local governments, and various publications of foreign governments, and technical and trade journals, and books, magazines, and newspapers, and reported prepared by the research scholars, universities, economics, etc. Right? So the secondary data may be either published one or unpublished one, but there is published data that is going to be available in various publications of central, state, and local governments, and various publications of foreign governments or international bodies, and technical and trade journals, and books, magazines, and newspapers, and reports prepared by the research scholars, universities, economics, in different fields. So these are the various sources of the secondary data. So by seeing this picture, you can easily extract what the data, how we are going to extract the secondary data on all. So for this diaries, the data what one extracting from the diary should also be secondary, and books and journals also secondary one, and organizational records, and pictorial representation, the data what I am extracting from pictures should also be treated as secondary one, and then case files, and then films, the data extracting from television programs and newspapers and magazines, and website pages and internet and government publications and official statistics. So these are the various sources of this secondary data. Okay. So the diaries what I'm extracting should be a secondary one, and the data extracting from the books, journals, internet, films, television, newspapers, magazines like this. So everything should be treated as a secondary data. So the researcher before using this he must has to see the following characteristics of the secondary data. First one is that reliability of the data and suitability of the data and adequacy of the data. So these are the three main characteristics what the researcher has to focus while collecting the secondary data. And while coming to the secondary data merits and demerits, so the merits is that it should be quite and cheap one, and wider geographical area is going to be needed, and longer orientation period is required and leading to find the primary data. So these are the merits of the secondary data. Okay. So through the secondary data, we're unable to extract the quick and cheap is the best one, and wider geographical area and longer orientation period is not needed and leading to find the primary data. Well, coming to the demerits, so here no fulfill of our specific research needs, and the pure accuracy is needed, and data is not up to dated, and then poor availability of availability is there in some of the cases, right? So these are some of the disadvantages of the secondary data. So, what are the various appropriate methods for collecting the data, collection of data? So, there are various methods that are available. So, as much the researcher must able to concentrate what kind of method and what kind of methods for his own study is going to be seen. For that, lot of factors is going to be considered. So, like nature, scope, and objective of the inquiry, and then availability of the funds, time factor, and precision required. So these are the three, four characteristics that are not required for the uh, selection of the appropriate method from the data collection. So first, what is the methods we are having how to identify? From that, what we have to see, we have to first identify the factors. So what factor comes under, like nature, scope, and then availability of funds, and then time factor and precision. Like this. There are differences, so many differences between primary and secondary data. So let's see this when it comes to take primary data. So this should be the real time data, whereas the data what I took should be the past data. And it should be about the sources of data, and it is not so about the sources of data. And it helps to find the gives the results and findings, whereas it should be able to refining the problem. And mostly this should be the costly and time-consuming process, but it is cheap and no time-consuming process is required here. And it should be also avoid the biasness of the response data, but it can know if the data is biased or not. It is more flexible one, and it should be less flexible. Right. So these are some of the differences between the primary and then secondary data. Okay. So the primary data what I took should be the real-time data, and the data what I took should be the past data here. And it should be sure about the various sources of data, but it is not sure about that various sources of the data, and it also helps to find the results and findings, but it should be able to refine the problem that is the different with the primary data, and it should be a cost and time consuming process for the primary, and it is not that much cost here. It should be very cheap and no time consuming also required for the secondary one, since already the data exists. So it should be also avoided the biasness or responsiveness, and it is can't know how it is the biased and unbiased. It is also more flexible and less flexible. That is some of the differences. So right, so in this video I'm going to discuss about some of the various methods that are available for collecting the data. So normally the data will be different types like primary data and secondary data. So these sources of data will be of two types like primary and then secondary data. The primary data is the thing where we can able to collect the first time, and it should be original one, original in character, and it should be real time data which is going to be collected by researcher himself. So these are the various methods that are available: observation method, interview method, and then questionnaire method through schedules, and so there are some other methods that are available for collecting the primary data. So observation method is the thing where we can able to directly by observations we can able to extract the data, and this observation should be of different types like structured one and then unstructured data. So the merits and demerits should be is that so the researcher can able to record the natural behavior and even verify the truth statements of the merits of this method. And when it comes to demerits, it should be expensive and very limited and may interfere with some other observational tasks. An interview method is the thing under one where you can able to extract the collecting the data by oral web stimuli, and reply also should be get in terms of oral web responses. So in that one, the personal interviews is the thing where you can able to extract the data by allotting the person as an interviewer, asking the question from face to face, front and extracting the information is the personal interviews. And the disadvantage is that it should be very expensive one, and then should be specially used that not suitable when the data set is large and widely spread out, geographical sample taken and all. And telephone interviews is the thing where I'm able to extract the information by contacting the responses on telephone and extracting the data. And merits and demerits is that the merits is faster than other methods, more flexible, and it should be also be cheaper one, and it should be also recall is also very easy. And demerits, it should be respondent to the only considered answers should going to be extracted, and surveys are is to be restricted to responses on telephone interviews, and then the questions has to be short and then point to. So collecting of data through questions is other method. So but it should be very low cost even, and then whenever the universe is large and widely spread geographically. And demerits is that it should be slowest of all, and inbuilt flexibility is there, and then the response should be executed. And collecting of data should schedule. So through schedules, we can able to extract the data by collecting like various government institutions and government companies and like this. And but it should be very expensive one, and mostly adopted by the investigations conducted by the government agencies. And some other methods of data collection would be warranty cards, distributors, consumer panels, and mechanical devices, and then projective techniques also. So merits and demerits of primary data is that so it should be high accuracy of the data, and but it should be very expensive one. And data interpretation is better here, and then more flexible, and should also be address some specific research issues, and up to date is that these are the advantages of primary one. And disadvantages means it should be very expensive and time consuming, not available immediately, and most of this data is going to be rejected by respondents not taking seriously, and require a lot of skills is going to be required. And secondary data is the thing where the data is going to be extracted already population thing. And these are the various sources of this secondary data, right? And merits, when it comes to merits, it should be quite and cheap, and then it should be wide and geographical area and longer in orientation period, leading to find the primary value. These are the advantages of the secondary data. And demerits is that not fulfill of specific research need, poor accuracy, and data is not up to date, and poor availability in some of the cases. So what are the major differences between the primary and secondary is that so primary data is the real-time data and sure about the various sources of data, help to find the results and finding the costly and time-consuming process, avoid biasness or response data, and more flexible. So whereas secondary data, it should be the past data and not sure about all the sources, and refining the problem is needed, but it is a cheap and not non-time consuming process, but can't know exactly if the data is biased or unbiased and less flexible. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.